In the previous movie, we created this environment backdrop object and set it up for a self-illuminated material that will give us the ability to manipulate the environment in the viewport and optionally render against a black background for compositing. Let's set up our view to make it a little bit easier to see. I've got edge faces turned on here in the viewport, so in the perspective view, I'll press F4 and turn those off. And go back to a standard shading mode in the physical camera. Click on User Defined or whatever the middlemost menu is and set that to standard. Open up the material editor. And for self-illumination, we want an arch and design material. And that will be found under Materials, Mental Ray, Arch and Design. Just drag that over into the view. Double-click it to load it into the material parameters and rename it ENV Self-Illume. We're ready to assign it to the object now. Drag from the output of the material onto the sphere in the scene. And now that assignment's been made. Back in the material editor, we don't want this material to respond to light in any way. Turn the diffuse level off, set it to 0. And likewise with the reflectivity, also set that to 0. We're ready now to assign a self-illumination map. We've already got a mini shading network left over from our environment. It's still in the view here. Use the middle mouse and pan around, and here's our little mini shading network. Remember, we had a bitmap, and we were multiplying that with a Kelvin temperature node in order to color correct it. Double-click on that bitmap, and you'll see that its coordinates are set up for a spherical environment. But that's not going to work on a geometric sphere. We need it to be a texture instead of an environment. Let's duplicate this shading network. Select all 3 of those nodes. Hold down Shift and drag to make a copy. And bring that down over close to the Arch and Design material. And connect the RGB multiply output to the self-illumination map input on the environment material. Now let's go over to the bitmap that's connected. Double-click on that and switch it over to a texture instead of an environment. And while we're here, just to remind you, we had to flip the environment, gave it a U tiling value of -1, and very importantly, filtering is turned off so we don't get a fuzzy background. At this point, we can actually see it in the viewport if we want. So with that bitmap node selected and nothing else, we can turn on Show Shaded Material in Viewport. So click off of everything and make sure nothing's selected. Then select the bitmap and turn on Show Shaded Material in Viewport. And now it's showing in our view. And at this point, we have the ability to move that object around. We can use the Move tool. Maybe we need to position the horizon up or down. I'll undo that with Control-Z. Or we could rotate and manipulate that object any way we want. Which, of course, is something we could not do very easily with these coordinate values here. I'll undo that rotation with Control-Z. And when we got that lined up the way we want it, we can now enable self-illumination. Back in the material editor, in our bitmap, we currently have a value of 37 for the output. If you scroll way down and open up output, we've got an output amount of 37. I'm going to opt to actually set that output amount in the material instead. So I'll set it to a value of 1 here. Go over to the material and double click it. And scrolling down a bit, we'll find under Special Purpose Maps that Self-Illumination Color is connected. But we also need to turn on self-illumination. And that's in this rollout, Self-Illumination Glow. Open that and enable it and set its luminance value to 37 to match the brightness of the bitmap we had previously. In the glow options here, we do want it to be visible in reflections. But in this case, we don't want to illuminate the scene because our suffuse illumination is coming from the skylight. Be aware that if you're using indirect diffuse GI, then a visible self-illuminated object will always project light into the scene. But if you're using final gathering, we have the option whether we want to illuminate the scene or not. And again, in this case, we don't want to illuminate the scene because our suffuse illumination is coming from the skylight. Okay, so we're in a good place here now to do a test render. We'll go ahead and click Render Production. Our render looks pretty good. It's barely distinguishable from the version with a true environment map. And we can take this one step further by rendering against a black background. Select the sphere in the viewport. Right-click and go into Object Properties, and simply disable Visible to Camera. It will still generate reflections, but it will not render directly. And once again, this will only work for final gathering. If you're using indirect diffuse GI, then it won't work, because in order for something to generate light, it needs to be visible to the camera. But with final gathering, we have some more freedom. So turn off visible to camera here, click OK, and do a final test rendering. Here's a before and after comparison showing first a standard environment map, which always displays in the background and always anti-aliases with the foreground. And here's a version in which the reflections are coming from a self-illuminated backdrop that has been made invisible to the camera. The direct and suffuse lighting have not changed. The only difference we see is a slight change in the reflections. But that is an acceptable compromise, considering that we now have the ability to render against a black background for compositing. And that's how to set up a self-illuminated backdrop and optionally make it invisible. And that concludes our chapter on exterior daylighting.